Alright, to be honest with you, drawing lips used to be easy. You know, you just draw a couple of lines, make it look like a vagina slit, and then call it a day. But then Kylie Jenner came in, and that bitch changed the whole game. Now everybody's lips need to be perfect. So today we're going to be talking about how I draw lips. I'm going to be covering the lip principles, and then I'm going to show you all the different angles in real time. And let's start out with the planes of the lips and roundness. It wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about planes, now would it? Now the lips contain 6 different planes, 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom. But as opposed to all the other features, you don't actually need to draw them in your drawing, because if you do, they just end up like weird piercings. Instead, you just need to imagine them while you're drawing and really think about the form rather than just drawing some flat ass lips. And something very important is to think about the mouth area as a bow and to really imagine how these planes are going to be wrapping around the lips. Like they're not just straight like this, because your lips are actually rounded. Then we have where to put the weight. Definitely not on your waist. Now I'm gonna be doing a video about line weight and what it really means in the future, but you just have to be careful not to draw the lips with the same line all over, because that looks like some shit that a kid would draw. Instead, you have to really pay attention to where you make your lines darker and where you fade them out. So places where the lips are touching or there's deeper shadows, it's really important to make your lines darker. And you don't just draw the middle line like this with the same line, because you really get the vaginal slit effect. So it's really important to put more weight right here into the corners, right here into the middle plane, then the top plane, again more in the middle, and then the bottom plane in the middle. Everything else you leave it pretty faded or almost transparent, because that way you're really showing that there's a soft edge there. If you just draw a hard line around your lips, you make them look like they're not part of the face. Like you make them look like they were stuck on top of your face with glue. And then we have the shape of the corners. Now as I told you, the corner of the lips are pretty much the most important part of the whole mouth, and a lot of people draw them either with a square or like a little dot, and it just looks wrong as shit. Instead, I always draw them with this sort of a comma shape, and I always pay attention to where is the comma facing. Is it going this way or is it going that way? Because what's gonna happen is that there's a lot of muscles around the mouth which connect right here to the corner of the mouth. So there's almost gonna be a dimple there. So if you just draw it with a little dot like this, you're not really showing all of the form. And usually this dimple is gonna have a soft edge in transition, so you don't wanna draw just a hard edge like this. You wanna build it up slowly and really think about the comma shape. And then we have the U above the lips. By that I mean this small dimple right here above your lip. And listen, I get so fucking angry at people for drawing that shit so pronounced and harsh, like making it look like a fucking crater. It looks like if your snot fell off, it's gonna make a little lake that somebody's gonna drown in it. You gotta be more subtle. Usually I'll just draw half of the dimple and only think about where the shadow is gonna be. But again, you have to be very subtle and draw this very transparent line. You don't wanna just draw the little lake. Then we have the 2 V's. Now the first V is this one right here, and people either don't draw it at all or they make it so obvious that the lips look like a sharp object. Instead, you just need to think about the corners of the V right here and put more weight in here, and then just connect it very, very gently. And then the second V is this one right here, and again, people don't know how much to push it, so really try to analyze the reference. And another really important thing is always draw this with separate lines. So you have one curve for the side, one line for the V, another line for the V, and then another curve. You never want to just draw one whole curve, because you lose all of the different planes. And finally we have simple breakdown juice from the shading. So lips are one of those things where the more detail that you add, the worse that they look. So try to keep it very simple, only pay attention to the basic forms and where you put the weight. Leave all of the prettiness in the juice for the shading. I mean, knowing how you guys shade, you're probably gonna ruin it anyway. So I always start out very gently with just finding out how wide the lips are supposed to be and just finding the basic proportions. Then I do a top curve and a bottom curve, just looking for the height of the lips. And as with everything else in drawing, you gotta make sure that you first have all of the proportion and then commit to your lines. Like, I don't know how fucking people do it. Like, yes, that's where the lips are. So the comma shape right here for the corners, then more weight right here for the corners of the V, and then just gently connecting the V to the corners, but again staying away from just doing it with one vaginal slit. Then you have the curve on top, the second V, and then the other curve. Put more weight right here into the bottom. You can kind of refine your lines and really go for something more clean, but again 90% of it is really gonna be in the line weight. Then we have the standard front view opened, and this is where it gets fucked up. Now don't even get me started on how angry I am at people drawing open mouths, because it's gonna take me forever. But the most important thing to think about is whether the opening of the mouth is gonna come from the bottom lip or the top lip, because you can both do this and this. So the first thing to judge is, are the corners of the mouth below the opening or above the opening? In this case, obviously the opening is coming from the top lip, so there's barely gonna be any change in the bottom lip. Now something that people always fuck up is they make the opening almost as big as the mouth, and it always looks like somebody's gonna suck some. Instead, you almost always need to make the opening smaller than it actually is, and really think about how you can make it beautiful and sexy, not just some fucking grimace like So I just draw the bottom lip, and then I draw the corners of the opening with these two triangles, and then I connect it for the top lip. But you again need to draw separate lines and not just one big curve looking like a hole. Start out with the corners, then the basic shape. Find where the bottom lip is, the bottom curve, then exactly how big the opening needs to be. More weight right here for the triangles of the opening, and then you just connect it to the top lip and the bottom lip. Then refine the commas for the corners and connect it to that opening very gently. Then you have the top V and more weight on the bottom curve. And of course the little dimple that's not looking like a little lake. And please don't draw any teeth. If the opening is small, you just leave it empty like this. You don't want to be making people into horses. Then we have the standard 3/4 view. Now as you can see, the planes of the lips never change. They always remain the same. It's only the positioning that kind of changes. So it's really important to think about how the direction of the wrapping of the planes is going to change. If there's a really extreme angle, the wrapping might be going this way, but if it's more casual like this 3/4 view, the wrapping is gonna be more like a U. Start out with the corners, that connecting line, then the basic curves. Now with the rotation of the lip, the more that the angle changes, the more that the proportion between the plane changes. When the person is turning that way, the further plane, this one, is gonna be a lot smaller than this, and it's gonna be more than extreme angle. So the angle in here is gonna be like this, and then in here is gonna be a lot more straight. So first draw the V, and again put more weight into the corners of the V, then connect it to the corners, and make sure that there's an overlap between the V and the line connecting to the corner, because that way you're showing that this middle plane is going to be standing in front of this further plane, because it's all about planes. Then you have the top V, the connecting line, and then this further connecting line that you can actually make out of two different lines, so that way you're showing that this is a lot more 3D and it's again wrapping around. And you put more weight into the bottom curve, you can refine the commas, and then even separate the bottom lip, the bottom plane of the bottom. Too many bottoms. Then we have the standard 3/4 but opened, and in this case the corners of the mouth are going to be sitting right in the middle of the opening, so the opening is going to come from both the top lip and the bottom lip. Find the basic proportion first, then the curves, more extreme on the other side, bottom one, and then thinking about the corners of the opening. Now you see how big this opening is? It goes from here to here. How big that make it? As big as my penis. Pretty small. Another really important thing is to think about how you're gonna connect the corners of the opening. Are you just gonna do a simple curve like this, or are you gonna go with more of a W? If you go with a W, that's gonna give you more expressive lips. If you just want to keep it more casual and sexy, I advise you to just go with a simple curve. But whatever you do, never draw a W with one line. If you want to draw one line, just keep it a curve. If you want to draw a W, keep it with separate lines. And see how I still put a lot more weight right here into the corners, drawing this sort of a triangle. I don't just draw a fucking dot. Then we have the bottom opening, the top V, and then again the further plane is broken down into two different lines, this one and this one. More weight into the commas, more weight on the bottom, and then in 3/4 it might be really useful to draw the wrapping of the planes so that way you show more of the form. See how in the previous example it made sense for the wrapping around to go in opposite directions like this, and then in this case it actually makes sense to go in the same direction, but whatever you do, you need to exaggerate it to show the form. That's structure, bitch. Then we have the standard profile view. And the biggest problem that people have with profiles is they just draw the lip as if it's like one single plane and it looks flat as fuck. Instead in here, you can clearly see how there's still gonna be two different planes. So the middle one is gonna be right here in the corner, and then the side is gonna be right next to it. So I start out with a line connecting the nose and the chin, and it's really important to look at where do the lips touch that line. So see how the bottom lip is literally touching it, and then there's a lot of space between the top lip and the line. Start out with all of the lines, just measuring all of the different proportions, and then you have all of the structure. And very, very important is to keep everything with separate lines. So one line for the nose, one for the dimple, one for the top lip, one for the bottom lip, then you have the chin and all that. But you don't just draw it with one continuous line because it looks fucking horrible. So it might take you a while to capture all the right proportions, but this is what you need to have before you even start thinking about line weight. So I do the comma, and then I think about how the top lip is really gonna be rotating around, and it's gonna be going inside for the V, and then it's connecting to the comma. Then the bottom lip is not just the C sitting on top, but it actually first comes out with a straight line, and then it rotates. Then you kind of go back for the comma, but you don't fully connect it, and then you have a separate line right here for the chin. Then for the top lip, try to really observe the shape of it. Don't just do a curve like this, but really look at how does it go. Is there a V? Is there more of a curve? Does it go in here or not going here? I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. And in profile view, it's especially important to add more weight right here into the middle to really show the form and the overlap. The vaginal slit doesn't look good in any angle. Then for the standard profile opened, you just look at exactly where the opening is happening, and you look at which lip it's coming from. So you're gonna have all of the same lines and start out with the same stuff, but this line right here with the green of the bottom lip is just gonna touch the top lip right here in the middle instead of touching it right here on the edge. And then instead of just putting more weight right here into the V, you just draw this little triangle to represent the opening. Then with the almost profile view, it's really important to show the little bit of plane that you're seeing from the other side of the lip. So you start out with the basic shape, then you find out exactly where the lips connect, and it's really important to find the exact shape of the opening. So in the front view, that opening almost looks like a square, and then in the 3/4, it's gonna get more extreme on one side, and then the more it rotates, the more it starts looking like a triangle with more weight on this side right here. So I make sure to look at the reference and really look at the angle of these lines so I can judge the proportions. So put a lot more weight onto the further side, then put a little bit of weight into this corner, and then just connect it to the comma. And then the more the lips rotate, the less you're gonna see of the V. So it's not gonna be like this, but it's gonna be very, very subtle, and it's gonna go down to the comma. Then make sure that you have an overlap right here to show that this further plane is really gonna be sitting behind the middle plane. Then you have the bottom lip, and see how I'm doing two separate lines, because the more straight lines that you use, the more you're showing structure. If you just do it with a curve, you just have the duck face shit. Then with the almost profile looking down, it's really important to show this overlap of the top lip and the bottom lip, so that way that the bottom lip looks like it's sitting behind. So again, basic shape, then the comma, then separate top lip from bottom lip, and then find exactly where they connect and make sure that you have that overlap. Then you go right here for the V, and then you go down to connect it to the comma. And see how goofy it looks when there's literally no line weight? But if you put a lot more of a dark line right here, it actually still looks goofy. Then we have tiny bitch lips. Now these are the type of lips that a villain in a Disney movie is gonna have. And the biggest problem that people have with those is that they just draw them tiny all over, and they start looking like something else. Instead, if you notice, the tiny beach effect is gonna come right here from the tiny corners, but the middle plane is still pretty juicy. So something that you can do after you have the two V's is you can push the connecting curves more, and that way you have more space in the middle and the sides are barely visible. Then we have big old lips. So similar to the tiny beach ones, you can see how they're not gonna be affected everywhere the same. So the sides are a lot smaller, but then the middle is kind of thick. So when drawing them, don't just draw a huge curve like this, but rather focus more in the middle plane and draw the V's a lot wider. And then pay attention to where the commas compare to the middle. So they're not gonna be right in the center, but they're gonna be more to the top, and then it's gonna go down for the middle. And then you have the bottom. Then we have wavy lips. And these are the type of lips that when people see, they just draw these really weird curves and they look super out of place. Instead, much of the waviness is actually gonna come from the middle plane. So if you exaggerate that and then you bring down the commas, you're gonna get the wavy effect. But whatever you do, make sure that you still think about the three different planes. Then sometimes you might see straight lips that have no wave whatsoever. In that case, you almost have to invent a little bit of an opening so you can show the form. But whatever you do, you don't just draw them straight like this. And then here I wanted to illustrate to you the rotation of the lips. So the more that the lips get rotated, the more the wrapping is gonna get more extreme. So in the front angle, it's literally a straight line. Then it gets a little bit more of a curve, then even more of a curve, and then the side is a full-blown curve. And the way that you can think about it is, if you picture a bow, the middle of it is gonna be straight, but then the more it gets to the side, the more extreme it's gonna get. Then we have what's good lips. Now, even if you have some sort of a weird expression, all of the planes are still gonna remain the same, and you just need to pay attention to how big the opening is gonna be and then how big the lips themselves are gonna be. So I still start out with the basic proportions, then I find the shape of the opening, more weight into the corners of that, then more weight into the commas, then you have the V, the connecting lines, and the bottom. How many times do I need to repeat the same shit? Now, if you really want to draw teeth, you don't draw each separate tooth, making it look like a crack addict, but instead you just draw the gum between two different teeth. So even if they're more visible in the reference, it's usually just enough to draw one single gum to really show the teeth. And you don't draw it with a straight line like this, because you make it look like there's a gap there, but you just draw it with a simple triangle and very gently. If both the bottom and the top teeth are showing, I recommend you just to fill it out with black in the bottom, because it's just gonna look like ugh. And finally we have how to draw smiles. You don't draw smiles ever. They look fucking horrible. People are like, oh, the smile is the most beautiful thing in the world. So these are all the different angles for today, and I've actually created this free PDF for you with all the different planes and sketches, and you can download it for free from the description so you can cheat next time you're doing lips. Also, my next video is gonna be a roast critique video, so if you want your work to be featured on my YouTube channel, make sure you go to my Discord server and post your work in the channel Your Art Sucks. You can find all of that in the description, and keep on drawing lips, baby.